Hello there and welcome. I'm Reverend Nhien, founder of Evolving Enneagram and the author of the Enneagram of the Soul, a 40-day spiritual companion for the 9 types. If you've been yearning for a compassionate path of awakening into a greater sense of wholeness, oneness, and unity, you are in the right place. This is where contemplation meets the Enneagram. Today, we're in week 2 of a 12-week Sunday Talk series based on the theme, The House of Three Instinctual Rooms. Last week, I invited you into the house through story and metaphor because poetry and symbol have a way of invoking what the soul already knows. I introduced shelter, belonging, spark as metaphors for the instinctual domains of life. And today, we'll go deeper, walking through each room together and drawing from Russ Hudson's zones, beginning to map your own relationship to each of these instinctual spaces. Today's talk is titled Mapping Your Life Within the Three Instinctual Rooms, Shelter, Belonging, Spark. We'll take today in 3 parts. In part 1, we'll orient to the terrain and explore why instinctual priorities even matter. In part 2, we'll walk the rooms, shelter, belonging, spark. In part 3, we'll integrate the map, instinctual bias, and look at how awareness, the role of awareness in the work that we're doing here. So let us begin. So part 1, orienting to the terrain, why instinctual priorities matter. Before we move further into today, in fact, even further into this whole instinctual exploration, I want to name where we are in this arc. Last week, I offered a broader orientation to the Enneagram as a map of our conscious awakening, and how the circle symbol of the Enneagram reflects our fundamental wholeness, oneness, and unity. And I want to again reiterate that as a foundation for our journey together. And then I shared also how historically we've explored the ways that each of the 3 centers of intelligence carries their own patterns and possibilities around this awakening. And in the heart center, we saw them move from passion to virtue. In the head center, we've explored the move from the fixation to the holy idea. And again, in this body center here, we explore what opening looks like in this body, also called the instinctual center, what Gurdjieff called the moving center. So this is the focus, the body center for all these weeks, so that we can become conscious of how our instinctual biases quietly and often unconsciously organize our everyday lives from the inside out. As we do this, we begin to see where our instinctual patterns serve us and where they may quietly, sometimes not so quietly, derail us. So before we think about this title, today's topic, mapping your life within the 3 instinctual rooms, before we try to understand it cognitively, I want to invite us to begin to sense our way into it. So if you're in a place where you can do so safely and comfortably, I invite you to take a moment now and let your body arrive. Feel the contact beneath you, the support of the chair or the floor, the quiet rhythm of your breath. You don't need to change anything. Just notice that you are here. When we speak of mapping, we are not talking about fixing or correcting anything. A map doesn't tell you where you should be. It simply helps you to see where you already are. It helps you to become conscious of where you already are. And so today we're gently mapping how life force moves within you, how it might seek shelter, reach for belonging, and chase spark. So these are not ideas for you to master. Rather, they're like movements you already know in your own body. The ways attention, energy, life force naturally organize themselves or habitually organize themselves. You might notice this in something very ordinary, like how you spend your time when no one is watching, what you protect when you're tired, or what quietly pulls your attention when you finally have a free moment. The focus of today's message is the role our instinctual drives play in shaping our everyday lives. It's huge, often even more influential, as I've been saying, than our Enneagram type. And our type shapes how we see our perspective, worldview, and emotional and mental habits. But our instinctual drives, again, often unconsciously shape what we prioritize, what we invest energy and attention in, what we tend to protect, where our life force regularly goes. And so let us journey now as we move into part two, into each of these three rooms, really taking a bit of time in each room, exploring the zones within each room. And the zones as background are just something that Russ Hudson, over decades of teaching this material, learned it can be helpful when the instinctual domain can hold this huge cluster of instinctual drives, that there's a way of breaking them down into three zones that might make them more accessible or coherent for some. So I have found these zones to be helpful. So I'm incorporating it into this metaphor of the three rooms. We can still call them zones. If you're very visual, if you like to play with the metaphor, you can think of it as like corners of the room, right? Like just spaces within each of these rooms. And as a reminder, all of us have all three instinctual rooms alive within us. No one's missing any of them, though it might sometimes feel that way to some of us. And each room contains like distinct zones of attention and energy, specific ways life force is prioritized, mobilized, and expressed within that instinctual domain or room. So, as we visit each room today, notice if you left your body as I was talking, remembering your body and the seat and the contact below. And I invite you to hold the following questions gently as we journey through each of the rooms. What is my relationship to this room? Asking yourself that. What is the tone of that relationship? Attentive, neglectful, anxious, balanced? Has it changed over the years? See if you can let your body answer before your mind does. And notice what becomes available as awareness begins to enter the room. Room 1, the stone room, the room of shelter. The room of shelter relates to the self-preservation instinct, as it's more commonly called, right? The instinct of preserving and conserving life. The core fear here is the fear of not surviving. Enneagram teacher Mario Sikora sometimes describes this instinctual domain as being about nesting and nurturing. We might ask here, what allows me to feel steady and resourced enough to be here? And now, drawing from the teachings of Russ Hudson, within the room of shelter, let us visit the 3 zones where energy and attention commonly organize. Zone 1, the zone of self-care. So diet and eating, exercise and fitness, sleep and rest, relaxation and stress reduction, the balance between stimulation and comfort being at issue. Zone 2, practicality and resources, attention to money, time, energy, persistence, and practical know-how. And finally, zone 3, home life. Structure and organization, safety and security, the holding environment, chores and maintenance, and home as a launch pad for the rest of life. As you sense into this whole room of shelter with all these 3 zones, notice, what is my relationship to this room? And what happens in my body as awareness enters here? Room 2, the Great Hall. The room of belonging corresponds to what we more commonly call in the Enneagram world the social instinct. Mario Sikora calls it the navigating instinct. The core fear here is the fear of not belonging. And in this domain of life, in this room, we are living out the question, where do I find my place among others? And how do I participate in the larger field of life? Mario Sikora describes this instinctual domain as being about orienting to the group. Within this room, again drawing from Russ's teachings, there are 3 zones where attention and energy orient relationally. Zone 1 is the zone of interpreting. And this is about reading people, reading between the lines, attunement, empathy, adaptation. Zone 2 is the zone of connection, where we're creating and sustaining relationships. We're interested in communication and play and reciprocity. And finally, zone 3, the zone of participation. This relates to involvement, enrolling people, contribution, having the question about your contribution, awareness of context, the felt sense of belonging. Notice your relationship to these zones, to this room. Sense the tone of your relationship here. Ease, effort, vigilance, longing. And what becomes available just by noticing. Over the coming weeks, remember, we'll explore these zones one at a time. For now, simply notice any general response your body has to this room, the room of belonging. And you may notice that today I'm not offering many concrete examples yet, and that's intentional. Before we interpret or apply these teachings, I want us to first sense how these rooms live in us directly, beneath explanation, beneath story. And then in the weeks ahead, especially as we move zone by zone, we're going to take our time. We'll bring in much more everyday texture and lived experience along with the teachings and the examples. But for today, dropping back in, noticing is enough. And finally, room 3, the high tower, the room of spark. In the original story, we moved from the room of shelter to the room of belonging. And now, today, we climb the stairs up to the high tower, the room of spark. This room corresponds to what is typically referred to as the sexual instinct. I like Mario Sikора's term here. He calls it the transmitting instinct. You may also have heard this instinct referred to as the one-to-one, though I don't tend to use that language. So a preference for one-to-one interactions, in my view, does not necessarily indicate a sexual or spark dominant instincts. What we're pointing to here is not like relational in style. It's not about connection like the room of belonging, but it's the way life force seeks intensity, aliveness, chemistry, like transmission. So the core fear here has been named as the fear of being undesirable, right? If you think about the sexual instinct at root and the need for procreation and survival in that way, right? So here in the room of spark, we're living out the question, what ignites my life force and propels me toward others, toward creativity, transformation, and yes, connection. And Mario Sikora describes this instinctual domain as being about attracting and bonding. Within this room, again, according to Russ's teachings, there are 3 zones where attention and energy intensify. In zone 1, the zone of attraction, we have things like attention to broadcasting and transmitting, being attracted, display, choosing and discriminating, competition. In zone 2, we have the zone of exploration, and that's about like activation, risk, leaving one's comfort zone, finding the edge, knowing when to go for it or when to stop in time. That's something on your radar in this instinctual domain in this room. And then finally, in zone 3, the zone of merging, here in the room of spark, there's there's this issue of focus and involvement, like losing oneself entirely in a person or an activity, a creative pursuit. It's spending your energy, not conserving it, like in the Ruma shelter. It's passion, the dance between concentration, like that hyper focus, and distraction, too many choices. So notice your energy right now. Does it feel expansive, contracted? Has it intensified? Is it curious, balanced? Take a moment to notice. And now we move into part 3, integrating this map. As we begin to gather what we've noticed, and I do encourage you, you could review this video as many times as you'd like, just sort of sitting with this, pausing the recording, being with it for longer. So as we begin to gather our observations, I want to name something that helps make sense of our experience. It might already be pretty obvious, but we do not inhabit these rooms evenly. All of us have all these instinctual drives within us, but we also have instinctual biases. Not because something's wrong, but because life requires adaptation, right? And so our instinctual stacking, sometimes called the instinctual sequence, I just use stacking. I've always used it, but I feel like I see it in the same way, right? It's almost like a prioritization, right? Our instinctual stacking reflects how attention and energy are prioritized across the 3 rooms. Traditionally, in the Enneagram world, we've described these 3 positions as, when we talk about the instincts, your dominant instinct, your secondary or middle instinct, and then finally, your neglected, repressed, or blind spot area. So that's the traditional language. And so I'll go back and forth a bit to connect that to how we're exploring these rooms. The instinctual drives literally drive us each day. We often experience them as, of course, this is important, right? We take it like almost for granted when it's our dominant, especially. And often, so the dominant instinct tends to feel obvious and unquestioned. And even if we're in our like sort of righteous phases of like, shouldn't everyone value this? That's how it feels. So you can see this is the beginning as we judge how we start to build divides among us depending on different instinctual biases. Our secondary instinct is usually accessible, usually fairly functional. It's like a room we enter in when we need something in it, but it's not the room we most inhabit. Our blind spot, on the other hand, again, is not something that's absent. It's not like we're missing it, but it's like an area within this house of our consciousness that's just overlooked, under-resourced, could be uncomfortable, even to the point where it feels like the forbidden room or a room that's like locked. We can't really go in there. It jeopardizes the other priorities. It jeopardizes what the instinctual drives are in the other rooms. And so we might just steer clear of it as a result, leading to imbalance in how we live our lives and not in a way that actually defeats our own path of endeavoring to awaken to and embrace our whole selves. So much of our shadow work can live in this blind spot, repressed instinctual domain. As you sit with what I've introduced today and what you've noticed within your own being, as you sit with what you've noticed today, I want to offer these words from Mario Sikora. The instinctual biases are deeply ingrained tendencies to find certain aspects of life more important than others, and to focus our attention accordingly. In short, they are at the heart of our systems of values, the fundamental biological needs that matter most to us. Let that land gently. You may have recognized a room you inhabit most habitually, a room you comfortably visit as needed, and perhaps a room you tend to neglect, deem forbidden, or leave in shadow. For now, no need to change any behavior unless you're called to it. Just noticing is enough. You don't need to move rooms, break down walls, fix anything tonight. Presence itself, awareness itself, if we're willing to trust it and abide in it, begins to soften the walls. And I'll leave you with words from John Lukovich, who wrote, "Our instinctual drives exert a tremendous influence on our psychology and therefore on our spiritual development. With the right cultivation, they are able to support us in expanding the horizons of how we experience ourselves, how we relate to our own life force, and how we create conditions for fostering greater depths of presence." Namaste. Friends, before we fully close, I have just two brief practical notes. First, this is the final week to join our winter CPE cohorts if you've been discerning whether this journey is right for you. You'll also find a contribution link below, even if you're not part of our groups. If you found this channel supportive and wish to help sustain our programming, your support is very, very welcome. And finally, for those who feel genuinely drawn to go even deeper into the House of Three Rooms, we're also offering a self-paced online intensive entitled Nuances of Type and Subtype, from Surviving to Thriving. So this course is designed for spiritual explorers and professionals. It qualifies for 17 IEA professional accreditation hours for those of you who are looking. And of course, participation is entirely optional. More details will be in the notes below. And now, thank you for your presence here.